in the shadowed opulence of the Oval Office on the crisp morning of November 5, 2025, as the first headlines of Zohran Mamdani's razor-thin 4% triumph over Andrew Cuomo's independent insurgency and Curtis Sliwa's Republican afterthought splashed across every screen from Fox to MSNBC, President Donald Trump paced the resolute desk like a caged lion, his trademark scowl deepening with each notification ping from his gold-plated iPhone, the air thick with the acrid tang of black coffee and unfiltered outrage as he muttered to Chief of Staff Susie Wiles about the disgrace of his hometown falling to a communist kid from Queens, a 34-year-old Democratic socialist whose assembly district had been a thorn in Trump's side since the 2022 midterms. When Mamdani's rent stabilization bills threatened the very luxury condo developments that padded the pockets of Trump's Mar-a-Lago golf buddies, a grudge that had simmered through the campaign's fevered months, erupting in a pre-election truth social barrage where Trump endorsed Cuomo with a venomous flourish, declaring a Sliwa vote a vote for the radical, and vowing to starve the beast of federal dollars if Mamdani dared cross the finish line, a threat that now hung like a guillotine over the $7. $4 billion in annual grants propping up New York's subways, schools, and hospitals, funds Trump wielded like a club in his first term against sanctuary cities, but this time laced with a personal sting, for Mamdani wasn't just any progressive upstart. He was the son of Ugandan exiles who'd woven tales of resilience into a narrative that resonated with the immigrant underclass Trump had demonized, flipping the Bronx by 15 points and surging to 735,000 early votes through a volunteer army of 50,000 Gen Z firebrands who'd canvassed every halal cart and bodega from Astoria to the Arthur Kill, their chance of affordability now drowning out Trump's warnings of zero chance of survival for a socialist-led Big Apple. As sunlight slanted through the bulletproof windows, casting elongated shadows on the presidential seal, Trump's inner circle, Stephen Miller with his perpetual sneer, Caroline Leavitt clutching a tablet of attack memes, huddled in a crisis scrum, dissecting exit polls that revealed Mamdani's secret sauce. A coalition of Black and Latino voters who'd abandoned Cuomo's centrist promises by 20-point margins, galvanized by the mayor-elect's unapologetic advocacy for Palestinian rights and ceasefire, calls that had drawn 40,000 to Queens rallies, a boldness Trump equated to divided loyalties, in a Fox hit that morning, his voice graveling over the airwaves as he mispronounced Mamdani with deliberate disdain, insisting the win was rigged by ballot harvesters, despite turnout-shattering 1969 records at over 2 million, a surge Trump privately confessed to Wiles was terrifying because it mirrored the 2018 blue wave that cost him the House, but amplified in the media capital where Mamdani's victory speech, delivered to a sea of keffiyehs and rainbow flags under Brooklyn Paramount's marquee, taunted, "To get to any of us, you have to go through New York," a direct shot that had Trump slamming his fist on the desk, barking orders for a total war room to map retaliatory strikes, starting with a midnight memo to Treasury directing audits on the city's $112 billion budget for ideological pork, a move designed to choke Mamdani's flagship pledges like capping rents at pre-2020 levels, and universal child care, initiatives that had propelled the DSA-endorsed underdog from 15% in spring polls to a mandate built on door knocks in rain-soaked projects where families shared stories of $4,000 studios devouring paychecks, stories Mamdani amplified in viral TikToks blending policy with poetry, his Ugandan lilt reciting lines from his filmmaker father's exile chronicles to underscore a city built by immigrants, led by an immigrant, a heritage Trump twisted into foreign agitator, fodder for his base, firing off a 4-word post at 2:17 a.m., "And so it begins," that racked up 15 million views by breakfast, signaling not just fury, but fear. For in the Beltway's marble corridors, whispers grew that this wasn't mere NYC drama, but a harbinger of progressive insurgencies rippling to Philly and Detroit, where Mamdani-inspired candidates eyed 2026 races with affordability blueprints threatening Trump's economic nationalism. By midday, as Mamdani's transition team, co-chaired by antitrust hawk Lena Khan and Labour vet Maria Torres Springer, convened in a sun-dappled Queens community center to sketch Trump-proof buffers like a $20 million blockchain resilience fund, Trump's rage metastasized into legislative lobs, with House Speaker Mike Johnson fast-tracking the Urban Sanity Act to claw back $2 billion in HUD subsidies unless Mamdani renounced sanctuary policies that shielded 100,000 migrants since 2022, a policy Trump branded inviting invasion during a Miami rally detour, his crowd roaring as he painted apocalyptic visions of rats fleeing socialism for Florida's freedom, a line that masked deeper anxieties confided to Jared Kushner over lunch at Trump Tower's empty penthouse, where the president fretted that Mamdani's win emboldened AOC's squad to push national rent controls, a specter that could tank donor dollars from real estate titans who'd funneled $40 million into Cuomo's super PAC, funds now evaporating like mist off the Hudson as Wall Street journals dissected the mayor-elect's 11.5% corporate tax hike proposal, a revenue raiser for green transit that Trump derided as eco-communism in a Rose Garden presser, flanked by charts graphing Venezuela 2.0 spirals, his finger jabbing at projections of capital flight that ignored Urban Institute models showing $10 billion in local multipliers from stabilized housing. As afternoon shadows lengthened over the Potomac, Trump's fury found a sharper edge in the Justice Department, where AG Pam Bondi greenlit probes into electoral anomalies in Mamdani's Astoria strongholds, FBI vans rolling into immigrant enclaves to canvass turnout spikes that owed more to faith leaders mobilizing masjids than any phantom fraud, a harassment tactic borrowed from 2020 playbooks but amplified by Mamdani's historic trifecta, first Muslim, first South Asian, youngest in a century, milestones Trump smeared as woke checkboxes in a Hannity call-in, his voice dripping sarcasm as he predicted Sharia streets by summer, a slur echoing far-right X-storms that backfired when Mamdani's rebuttal reel, subtitled in Arabic and Spanish, surged to 20 million views, framing the clash as despot versus democracy, a framing that had White House pollsters sweating over a 3-point national dip in Trump's approval, tied to suburban moms recoiling at the president's immigrant baiting amid their own childcare crunches. Evening brought no respite as Trump helicoptered to Bedminster for a victory lap on off-year GOP holds. But even there, amid golf green cheers, his soliloquy on Mamdani veered into unscripted venom, confessing to donors that the win hits home harder than Harris ever did, revealing a terror rooted not just in policy but pedigree for Mamdani's unyielding optimism, vowing relentless improvement in a speech that blended Bronx hip-hop beats with policy sonnets, mirrored the charisma Trump once monopolized, now splintered to a new generation that saw in the mayor-elect a blueprint for resisting MAGA's grip, a resistance that terrified Washington because it promised not defeat, but defiance, turning Trump's fury into fuel for a nationwide reckoning where blue cities became bastions against red retribution, the opening salvos of a mayoral mandate that would test the Republic's federalist fibers like never before. Deep within the subterranean briefing rooms of Capitol Hill on November 6, 2025, as the acrid scent of printer ink mingled with the stale donuts of an all-nighter caucus, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer rubbed his temples over a stack of Siena polls showing Zohran Mamdani's victory catalyzing a 7-point progressive surge in Philly's mayoral polls and a 5-point DSA bump in Detroit's council races, a seismic shift that had his moderate flank, reps from Long Island to the Hudson Valley, phoning in frantic alerts about Mamdani contagion threatening 2026 House flips in NY03 and NY17. Districts where affordability crusades had already peeled 10% of suburban independents from GOP rolls, a bleed Trump attributed to Cuomo's weakness in a blistering morning tweet storm, but one that privately gnawed at Schumer's calculus, forcing him to broker uneasy truces with AOC's progressive bloc to codify rent caps in the upcoming infrastructure bill, a concession born of the terror that Mamdani's blueprint, tiered stabilizations capping hikes at 2% for under 80K households while courting developer density bonuses, could export to battlegrounds like Phoenix and Atlanta, where Trump's border wall fever dreams clashed with urban voters' pleas for $20 minimum wages and free buses, policies Mamdani prototyped in his assembly days to slash subway delays by 20% and boost Bronx small businesses by $2 billion in ripple effects, gains now dissected in Beltway War. Games where GOP strategists like Kevin McCarthy warned of a blue urban archipelago, insulating Democrats from midterm headwinds, a fortress of fortified cities where Mamdani's volunteer model, 50,000 door knockers armed with apps linking voters to co-op grocery pilots, spawned copycat operations in Oakland and Minneapolis, drawing $15 million in small-dollar floods that dwarfed traditional PAC hauls. As fluorescent lights hummed overhead, House Progressives Chair Pramila Jayapal convened a shadow summit in Rayburn's bowels, toasting Mamdani's win as the antidote to Trump's poison, her voice echoing off oak-paneled walls as she mapped escalations. Nationalizing his green New York for carbon-neutral transit by 2030, a vision of electrified subways and e-bike subsidies that could mobilize 2 million climate youth in swing states, a demographic Trump lambasted as eco-terrorists in a CPAC remnant rant, but one whose apathy he'd courted with fossil fuel subsidies, now backfiring as Mamdani's interfaith coalitions, from masjids to synagogues, bridged Gaza divides to endorse joint safety nets, flipping 5% of Jewish voters in Brooklyn hybrids and eroding the pro-Israel firewall that had shielded GOP foreign aid hawks, a fracture that had AIPAC lobbyists storming Schumer's office with pleas to rein in the radicals before Mamdani's model inspired a San Francisco recall-proofing against recall threats. Across the rotunda, in the GOP's steamy cloakroom where cigar smoke curled like question marks, Whip Tom Emmer paced with a red-lined ledger of federal spigots, $4 billion in commerce grants, $3 billion in EPA clean air funds, plotting impoundments to strangle Mamdani's people's budget, a $9 billion war chest from millionaire surtaxes earmarked for 100,000 affordable units and mental health embeds in NYPD calls, reforms that had dropped homicides 12% in pilot zones, but which Emmer branded defund disguised in a floor speech that drew cheers from Freedom Caucus firebrands, their applause masking a deeper dread confided over whiskey in the monocle, that Mamdani's crossover appeal, 58% approval among Staten Island moderates on pothole fixes, signaled not just urban leftism, but a bipartisan affordability ethos that could siphon Rust Belt whites from Trump's forgotten man monopoly, especially as the mayor-elect's Common Ground caucus lured blue-collar vets with veteran hiring quotas, peeling 8% from red precincts in Queens, where Mamdani's ceasefire stance had once alienated, but now unified through shared economic grit. By noon, as interns ferried briefing binders stamped Mamdani menace, the terror crystallized in a bipartisan dread. For Democrats, the win's halo risked overreach, with centrists like Tom Suozzi decrying the DSA's purity tests in a post-op-ed that warned of suburban backlash if Mamdani's $30 wage ramp drove 50,000 jobs to Jersey, a fear Jayapal parried by leaking transition memos showing phased buffers for small grocers, a pragmatism that steadied nerves but amplified GOP paranoia, prompting Senator Lindsey Graham to thunder on the Sunday shows about Sharia subsidies infiltrating federal coffers, his hyperbole a veil for calculations showing Mamdani's model boosting Democratic turnout by 15% in metro adjacents, a tide that could swamp 20 House seats if replicated in Chicago's Lakefront or Miami's Exiles. Afternoon brought the filibuster, as McConnell's ghost-haunted strategy sessions where Republicans eyed nuking the 60-vote threshold to ram through a Patriot Cities Act, mandating immigration vetting for urban grants, a draconian pivot Trump teased in a Mar-a-Lago video, his face ruddy under palm fronds as he vowed no dime for division, but one that recoiled when Mamdani's viral thread, dissecting the threat as extortion, not governance, racked 10 million engagements, framing the clash as federal bullying versus municipal might, a narrative that had Beltway donors from Bloomberg to Soros hedging bets with $25 million pledges to Mamdani's Resilience Fund, a crypto-seeded shield against audits that projected 85% coverage for his healthcare supplement, ensuring 300,000 uninsured without single payer's fiscal fireworks. As dusk settled over the mall's monuments, casting the Capitol in bruised purples, the panic peaked in a closed-door DNC autopsy, where strategists charted Mamdani multipliers, his 40% Jewish support, despite pro-Palestine marches, signaling a de-radicalized left that could reclaim moderates alienated by Biden's Gaza hesitance, a realignment terrifying Republicans because it neutralized cultural wedges, turning transgender athlete bans into affordability afterthoughts when Mamdani's joy. Metrics, $300 million for park murals and artist co-ops, humanized progressivism as cultural bloom rather than cancel culture, a soft power that had even Hochul's Albany office floating state buy-in for his fast bus pilots, a thaw that chilled Trump's envoys dispatched to court veto-proof overrides. In the evening's coda, as K Street consultants crunched micros showing independents shifting 4 points toward Democrats on Trump-proofing vibes, Washington's terror coalesced around an unspoken truth. Mamdani's win wasn't a local quirk, but a national flare, illuminating pathways for blue strongholds to weather red storms, his unyielding fusion of grit and grace a mirror to Trump's bombast, promising midterms where affordability trumped animosity, and the Capitol's power brokers, left, right, and lobbyist, braced for a tide they could neither dam nor ride, under the relentless glare of C-SPAN cameras in a Rayburn hearing room on November 7, 2025, as the gavel cracked open a joint economic subcommittee probing urban affordability epidemics, Repejao. Ro Khanna invoked Zohran Mamdani's mandate like a talisman, his voice rising over partisan jeers to champion the mayor-elect's co-op grocery pilots as a scalable salve for the 40% of Americans, one eviction from homelessness, a crisis Mamdani had weaponized to forge his coalition of gig workers and grandmothers, their testimonials fueling a national echo that had DSA chapters in 20 cities launching Mamdani Minutes town halls dissecting rent freezes against Trump's tariff tempests, gatherings that swelled to 100,000 attendees by week's end. A grassroots groundswell terrifying GOP mapmakers because it bypassed traditional media, thriving on TikTok duets where baristas remixed Mamdani's halal cart rants into anthems for $15 bodega staples, a cultural insurgency that chipped at MAGA's heartland holdouts in Allentown and Akron, where factory towns grappled with $1,500 mortgages mirroring NYC's squeeze, polls showing 12% of white non-college men, Trump's bedrock, nodding to phased wage ramps if buffered for overtime bloat, as witnesses droned through spreadsheets projecting $5 billion in national savings from Mamdani-style mental health redirects. Senior Elizabeth Warren leaned into her mic with a gleam, tying the win to a people's firewall against Trump's shutdown brinkmanship, her filibuster defense now fortified by Mamdani's 62% swing voter approval on pothole pacts, a bipartisan bomb that exposed GOP fractures when Freedom Caucus reps like Matt Gaetz filibustered their own bill over sanctuary sellouts, their purism a gift to Democrats scripting ads splicing Mamdani's interfaith ambassadors, deploying 1,000 de-escalators to 70% of 911 psych calls, with Trump's ICE sweeps, a contrast that resonated in Latino-heavy FL27, where Miami's exiles weighed affordability over ancestry, shifting 6 points blue in Siena trackers. Afternoon recesses buzzed with lobbyist whispers in Longworth's corridors, where big tech envoys from Google to Amazon floated $1 billion in innovation accords, mirroring Mamdani's Flatiron AI labs, co-governed with unions, a hedge against his 5% surtax that spared venture caps but clawed $4 billion for community college, a model Khanna's bill nationalized to train 500,000 re-entry workers, terrifying Koch network funders because it undercut their gig economy gospel. Projections showing 20% dropout in red state apprenticeships without such scaffolds. A vulnerability Trump masked with oval rants about Mamdani's mirage, but one that had his pollster Kellyanne Conway leaking memos fretting a youthquake where Gen Z's 65% Mamdani support portended 2026 abstentions from GOP turnout drives, their algorithms favoring viral vines of the mayor-elect's victory strut over stale attack reels. As golden hour gilded the Anacostia, progressive think tanks like Data for Progress unveiled a Mamdani map, charting 50 metro vulnerabilities to federal cuts, from LA's homelessness grants to Boston's transit bonds, a cartography that armed blue mayors with contingency clauses for adversity pivots, empowering snap reallocations that Mamdani prototyped with his $20 million crypto buffer, drawing $50 million in 72 hours from Silicon skeptics of Trump's tech tariffs. a fiscal jujitsu that had Treasury's Scott Bessent convening crisis calls to preempt blockchain bailouts as subversive, his warnings underscoring a terror that decentralized dollars could neuter congressional leverage, turning impoundments into impotent gestures when cities like Seattle pledged matching funds for Mamdani's heat pump retrofits. A green wave projected to create 100,000 jobs nationwide by 2028, siphoning solar installers from red Sunbelt strongholds. Evening devolved into donor dinners at the Hay Adams, where Bloomberg Philanthropies' $100 million pledge to Mamdani's housing accelerator clashed with Adelson Ayres' vows to bankroll sanity PACs, auditing progressive pet projects, a funding feud that crystallized the reckoning. For MAGA, the win signaled donor desertion as Wall Street quants modeled 15% capital outflows from NYC, but 25% inflows to resilient hybrids, blending public banks with private equity, a pragmatism that lured even DeSantis donors hedging against Trump's volatility, their memos confiding that Mamdani's joy metrics, community solar arrays yielding 20% energy savings in Rockaways, humanized socialism as stewardship, not seizure, eroding the Venezuela vortex myth Trump peddled at CPAC Echoes. In the night's quiet capitulations, as strategists pored over X threads where Mamdani's Turn the Volume Up clip remixed with Trump's tantrums amassed 30 million impressions, the midterm nightmares sharpened, Democrats envisioning a fortress blue of 100 urban bulwarks insulating Senate flips in AZ and NV, where Mamdani's affordability gospel mobilized Latino moms with free pre-K pilots slashing absenteeism by 30%, gains that flipped 8% of GOP women in focus groups. Republicans, grappling with base burnout as Gates's purges alienated moderates eyeing Mamdani's veteran co-ops for bipartisan sheen, a mirror to Trump's first-term overreach that birthed the squad. Ultimately, as the dome's lights flickered against ink-black skies, Washington's tremors settled into a profound unease. Mamdani's victory as a virus vectoring through the body politic, inoculating progressives against intimidation while exposing MAGA's brittle bones, his immigrant-led insurgency a reminder that the Republic's reinvention flowed not from federal fiat, but borough boldness, promising 2026 as a canvas where affordability arcs bent toward justice and Trump's fury, once a unifier, fractured into the fault lines of a nation daring to dream beyond division.